Hi, you've reached the Talking Racewalking podcast. It's all about racewalking, of course. It's talking to racewalkers from around the world about racewalking. Join me, Noel Payne, a amateur racewalker in Canada, as I talk to elites, Olympians, record holders, masters walkers, and anybody who's out walking as fast as they can. Hi, so this is a section where I'd actually be talking to someone, a race walker. So this is where you can come in. If you know a race walker, you're a race walker, and you have an amazing story, I want to hear from you. So reach out, let's chat, let's get walking and talking. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Talking Race Walking. We've been to the States, we've been to Canada, and I'm heading back to the UK now. And I've managed to coordinate a chat with Cameron Corbishley. He is a younger race walker. I keep talking to folks that are younger than me, but that's pretty easy to do at my advanced age. So now, Cameron, I think I've got you down here is born in 1997. So that makes you 26, going on 27, or are you 27 now?
No, 26 at the moment. Birthday's the end of March, so
Okay, so almost 27.
yeah,
So he's
almost.
almost 27. I remember those 20s, and the 20s are super cool days. So Cameron, he made a bid to be on the last Olympic team in the 50K race walk event. He is a talented race walker. I'll list off his PBs here to give you an idea, but go on World Athletics and check him out. Google his name. 122.50 for 20K, 353 for 50K. He's sub 20 for 5K, and just over 40, just under 41 for 10K. So that's some quick walking, folks. And we've already discussed what walking and race walking and all the ins and outs of that in the last episode. So if you want to figure out what race walking is, go listen to the last episode we did. So Cameron, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
No, I've been pestering you to come on. We've just been trying to figure out that 5-hour time difference. So I'm glad it worked out. To start off with things, what keeps a younger athlete like yourself with so much talent? How do you keep race walking in a sport that often very few people understand and know about? What keeps you race walking?
Well, definitely, I think like the goals that you have and your aspirations, whatever that might be at any level, that's definitely something I've noticed is big for me in terms of that, like motivation and commitment and drive, wanting to kind of do better and be like the best version of myself, I would put it. And I'd then say probably like the other like biggest thing for me is definitely like the community and the kind of like friendships and those kind of like relationships you've like built and developed over the years. I know that's something that's massive for me, and I know as well the past couple of years with everything that's gone on around the world, where then you having like less of that is definitely something that I did like miss. So I'd say those are the two biggest things for me personally, is having goals and ambitions, and then also having the kind of friends and family around you along the way.
Now, does that include training partners as well? Because you were telling me you're moving back to sort of that sort of Leeds training group there in the UK. So so that must be important as well, to have like a good training group to kind of keep that motivation and everything going as well.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was younger, I kind of did do a lot of the race walking by myself. As I got a little bit older into like my later teens, and I did try to start finding groups and training partners that we could kind of link up with. Then once I turned 18 and then looking at university options, I wanted to move up to Leeds to be part of that national centre of race walking. Leeds is very with it being one of like the biggest cities in the UK, there's a number of different universities which you can pick from. So then we can have then different athletes, all similar ages, going to a number of different universities that are then all able to train together in the same group. I was there for 5 years during my time in university, and then just afterwards, I then relocated to Wales for a couple of years. It was during the pandemic. That then was training all by myself. Um, then, kind of after my, like you touched on briefly there, with my Olympic bid, unfortunately, I was unsuccessful. And then with as well like the demands of my job, I kind of had that following year on, so 2022, kind of stepped away a little bit from the event, took a bit of a break. That then having then that time away kind of refreshed me, refocused me on, kind of made me realize what I want and what my ambitions are. And I kind of said and made the decision then to move back to Leeds, into somewhere there where I've had success in the past, and I know that there's a big support group around me, other athletes to train with, coaches, and then various other sports practitioners which I then have access to, which I wouldn't have elsewhere. So having a big, wide support group is, I think, essential really if you want to be well successful and really like reach your personal potential.
No, it makes sense. And I mean, from my experience and talking to folks, I mean, I think Tom Bosworth was out at Leeds. I just had Brian
Yeah.
Hanley from Leeds
Hmm.
University talking about, what is race walking. So it seems like there's a supportive group, there's athletes there, and a community who's familiar with it as well. So it sounds like a supportive place to train. So I think
Yeah,
that makes sense.
even as well in the terms of like the wider athletics community, everyone's very supportive and everyone's very encouraging of each other. Like you don't have to be a race walker to, be friends with, or and just you going to the gym and bumping into other athletes, and you're going out doing a training session, and again like bumping into and seeing other athletes is, nice to be in that community and have all the athletes that are supporting each other and willing each other on.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's important. I think everybody I talk to here, I think that even people learning to race walk, you seem to be able to do a fair amount on your own in the beginning to kind of learn things, but then
Mm.
afterwards it does get hard. You kind of just want to like try and find someone else to either help coach you or to train with, because you can go with runners. I mean, I go with my partner. She runs, I race walk, but it isn't the same thing. Yeah, I think that at least there's a few more in Britain than there might be over here. So we're pretty big in Canada. So even if there's a few race walkers, there's like 5,000 to 6,000 kilometers between us sometimes. So, but now
Yeah.
let's get back to how you started, and then we're going to kind of go into your history with the event. So, how did you find race walking? What were you a runner first? How did you find race walking? What's your story?
So I started walking, I would say, from quite a young age, maybe younger than some other athletes. I first played football, or soccer, as you'd call it, when I was younger. Um, then I made a switch to play rugby union. Then when I was about 10, I then started doing athletics as a sport to do during the summer months
Yep.
for like the off season of rugby, just to kind of give myself something to do, like keep your kind of fitness up.
So
Um,
how did a rugby player get into race walk? I mean, let's go from there. So was it the first event, or did you try running before you hit race walking?
no, so I done what would just be like a under 11s like athletics group that
Okay.
would do a bit of everything. So, running, long jump, high jump, throwing events, like sprinting, distance, a bit of everything. And for me, getting into race walking, I was fortunate that there was a race walking coach that was also one of the coaches that was running the sessions, that kind of every other week would do maybe only about like 800 meters and some drills of race walking, but it got me exposed to the event, that at least like I knew what it was and kind of knew how to do the basics of it. That then when I was then competing for my local club in the kind of like local county competitions, race walking can often be an event that they ask athletes to do to kind of like make up points
Yep, yep.
for the team. But started off with like a 2K race walk, like 5 laps of the track, which kind of was about 11 or 12. It's quite on the longer side, but I gave it a go, and I remember, like, overtaking athletes as I went round, and quite and quite enjoyed it. So I kind of had a few more go at some other races, and was like, oh no, I like I really enjoy this and quite good at it. And then kind of kept taking gradually over time, just kept getting quicker and being able to do kind of travel further with it and do bigger events and competitions. So
No, I think that's great. It's different experiences depending where you go and what country in terms of how much exposure kids get during schools or outside of that. So it's quite interesting. Now, as well, something that came up with another chat with a US coach was, what is the attitude towards race walking, especially during your school days? Are people more open to it or aware of it in the UK? It's still, I think we don't see as much of it in schooling here in Canada, but in the US, at least from one person's perspective, it's one of those events where everybody has respect for all the events, and you wouldn't say anything to a 100 meter or laugh at somebody running the 400 meters. But there are stories of race walkers often getting sort of some mistreatment, or everybody's laughing and that kind of thing every once in a while. What's the atmosphere like in the UK? Is it a little better known or more respect?
um I think it can depend on where you go. So in Leeds, like, the community and the attitude towards race walking is fantastic. But then it is kind of the like hotbed like of race walking in the UK, that, to be honest, I can't remember the last time I got like heckled whilst I was out training.
Which is good.
Yeah, but then if I go back home, it would maybe be more often that you get like people shouting at their cars from you. When I lived in Wales, it was pretty much every time I left the door, I'd probably say. And it's, yeah, it makes no difference to me. I wouldn't have heard anything that I haven't heard before. If I have heard something before, then it might make me laugh, because I think you've thought of something a bit more creative. Um, would say that from then, when I engage and talk to people about it, a lot of people are interested and supportive of it. I'm not sure, maybe whether if I've kind of grown up and my kind of circles have matured, they're more kind of supportive and with it. Whereas when I was younger, there's, you definitely got people that, they try to like tease you and stuff about it. But whereas now I do find that, you can tell them how fast your 5K is, and most people have an idea of what's a good like 5K, or even what's a good time. I think like Parkrun's probably done a good thing with this, where
Yeah.
it exposed a lot of people to that kind of distance. That then when you tell them that your PB's under 20 minutes, they can't believe you.
Yeah, they have a
So
hard time getting their head around that. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, so but I would definitely say that. And the other thing is as well, with how kind of big part of my life it is, if kind of someone's quite like negative towards it, then I wouldn't really then spend too much time with that person. Or if it was maybe I would have to spend time with them and it's not something I'd ever kind of then share with them.
Yeah. No, I think from talking to people, I think we all have to admit that we're in a fairly niche sport. We're not in
Mm.
the 1870s where it was the biggest sport in the world. Um, it's evolved into a very niche sport with a high level of elites competing, but there's still a lot of the population that has no idea what it is. So I think as much as we as much as we don't like to be sort of, laughed at or, or jeered or even, even the questions after a while, I think we'll have to put up with it. I mean, and it does look, and we must admit, all of us, that it's not running, it's not race, it's not walking either. And if nobody else in the community does it, yeah, it just stands out a wee bit. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I'm the same way. So, but yeah, it's always cool to check in with people to see what the situation is. Are we all sort of encountering something common, or is it better in one country, or is there a different approach? Um, and speaking of different approaches, that leads me to my next question. We talked about your Olympic bid back for Tokyo. You mentioned that. Um, the race walking world has really undergone I don't even know the right word to describe it. I don't know if it's crisis or a transition or an evolution, but we've come to the point where, at least at the Olympics, we've lost the 50K. I don't know if that's permanent, um, but the Olympics tends to drive a lot of the other things, and we don't see a 50K at the Worlds anymore. And we've now gone to a 35K, but there's no 35K at the Olympics anymore. So I think the question on whether the 35K will survive will also be, have to be evaluated. So for someone, now correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your focus for quite a few years was leading into a 50K, and that's where you felt comfortable. And I think you're in the same boat as Evan, who's got a few years on you, but same thing, a 50K specialist. And when you tell someone that their only option is 20K, 30 kilometers less, how have you handled that transition, and what has it been like? And yeah,
Um,
what's it been like? Have you been able to move down to that distance and feel comfortable?
it's definitely something that's been challenging. I think with kind of the break that I had in kind of the 2022, I think that partly was as well like due to kind of the events changing and also with having like not making the Olympic team. Um, yeah. I don't think this is. I don't know how much common knowledge it is, but I had two invites from um the Olympic Committee, both for the 50K and for the 20K, but both were turned down by my federation, unfortunately. Which that was very hard to take, considering I was only 24 at the time, and I'd come off the back of doing a 353 and a 354 for 50K, and then 122.50 for 20K, six weeks after doing a 50K. So I definitely think there could have maybe been a bit more in there if I was on fresher legs. So um, whilst there was definitely was, I think, is more of a strength for the 50K naturally for me. It did um, maybe come easier to me than maybe other athletes have found it. And there's definitely kind of, I'd say, like a talent there. But then with then like tracking my kind of like training and other performances, it does then like all point towards the, you know, I should or can then like replicate that kind of performance over 20K. Since then, kind of having that break and then like building my fitness up, I think one of the things I have found harder, or it's been a bit like slower to come back, is that kind of top end speed.
Yeah.
That's something I've been working on a lot more, especially recently. The past couple of weeks, has been my kind of main focus with the like track sessions, and then building like the strength then in the gym. But in terms of that kind of long endurance, that's come back a lot quicker and easier. But with this year, with the kind of no 35k opportunities, there's no real point doing a 35 yet. That all the focus has been for and is on 20k, and trying to first like get back to the level I was, and then trying to now revise those PBs over, I'd say, like all the distances.
No, I think that makes sense. I'm as a, I mean, I'm older, so I'm not going to compete at the elite level, even if I wanted to. But what I find interesting is to watch what's going to happen with the 35K. Like I think we said before, the Olympics tends to drive funding for athletes. It tends to drive the events that people are focusing at. So now I've heard stories and I've got inside info in terms of why the relay happened and why the 35K didn't. But I think regardless of that, I think it'll have an impact on things. The race walk has always been known as an endurance event. And the 35K and the 20K are very close. We often now see the people that win the 20K are winning the 35K just because the wheels and the gears you need for both are very similar. Whereas you look at Evan and yourself, the 50K tends to be a strategic race where you see people leading at 15 or 20 or 25K or even 30. They're not there when you tune back in at the 40K mark. It's often a wait and see and, find your right spot and make your move, as opposed to, put it into high gear and go hard the entire time. It seems to be a different race. Are you finding you're racing 10,000 or 10K more, or do you think that's going to happen more if the focus is just a 20K event?
Yeah, definitely. I think so, especially as well with the ranking system that they're now using, and now you can have one other event as to kind of like substitute in with the main two. So with the free performances, definitely, I know like in my build up now to my next 20k, I'm gonna do a 10k prior to the event, as and aim for PB in it as well. So that's definitely kind of like looking at the kind of model, as you might say, of what is a 20k athlete. Then you need to kind of be looking at kind of the standard in which you want to reach, and then kind of then looking at then like the process goals with it, being like, how do you get there, what do you need to do, like how am I going to achieve that. And one of the things for me is like, right, if I want to walk this time for 20k, I'm going to need to be able to do 10k in this time and 5k in this time. And like I touched on then, that's definitely then for me where I find then now I've got to use my kind of foundation of that big like endurance foundation that I'd built over those years training for 50k, now transitioning that to the 20k, where now I've got to try and be able to hold that high intensity for longer. And I do find that as well with how I race a 20k, that's as well like the tactics of it is something as well that I'm going to have to try and like learn and adapt to. And like you said there with the 50k, it is more about sitting back and being patient and waiting to take your move. But 20k at the highest level, it's all guns blazing pretty much from the go, and then you've got to go out fast and then be able to pick it up. There's no like settling into it. You've got to be ready.
Yeah, no, and I think I mean, we just mentioned Evan, and I mean, Evan started his season off with a 10K and a
Mm.
PB, and it's the same thing. I mean, there was strategy in his race, but I mean, they were going at a high gear and they just kicked it into a higher gear at the
Mm.
very end. So and it's a different setup. And I think I don't know if you'll agree with me, but I think race walking has actually shifted down in terms of 20K at the elite level being the minimum race, the shortest for most people. It's now it's basically the longest if unless the 35 survives, we're going to have a 20K race and then people shifting down to a 10K to prepare for that 20K. So it is quite the shift in race walking. Have you found your technique changes at all in terms of doing, because 50K you gear down a bit. You're not the turnover and everything is not quite the same. That have you had to adjust any of your training in terms of technique wise, in terms of, because I think a lot of people, especially those folks that aren't at the elite level now, listening to this podcast, um, a lot of the masters folks, there's like a 1,500 meters or 3,000 meters off an indoors, or most of us are say focused on a 5K or 10K. And even that, to try and go really hard and maintain legality and not come off the ground is a lot harder than, say, if I'm going to go for 20K and I've geared back a little bit. I'm not worrying quite so much about, airtime. I'm not quite so worried about losing as much of my technique as I get fatigue. It's just different focus. What have you found you've had to adjust in terms of trying to go shorter and faster?
Um, I think in terms of like the legality of it, a lot of that I think stays the same. Like that should be consistent. It's always something that we try to work on in training, that your technique for the steady work then just transitions smoothly
It should,
across
yeah.
to the like top end pace. And I know that's something that I then struggled with in Doha. Then it actually being a bit slower, I then struggled with my technique slowing like at, at that end, because all the work I kind of do is at like the top end, that then I then found it harder to go
Back.
backwards. So for me, like the transitioning to 20K, I it's not so much of a concern. But then in terms of then like the work that you do for it, there is definitely aspects that I know in training that myself and my coach like are working towards and focusing on, with a pure drive and focus of being like this will get your technique quicker. And I mean, like the two kind of biggest things for like how in your technique how quickly you're going is leg strides and leg cadence. Do you want it to be kind of as long as possible, like relative to your height, and then your leg cadence then as quick as possible, and kind of approaching that kind of like 200 strides per minute, if not more.
Yeah,
um,
it's a lot.
so I know one statistic I think I maybe like to tell kind of like the casual like fans of the sport, is that it's like comparable to like a 400 like 800 runner with the turnover, but for 20K or 35.
Yeah, as a former 800 and 1,500 meter runner in my younger days, I completely understand. And I think others that have done it as well will completely understand. It's uh, anybody who's a runner out there listening to it as well, figure out what your turnover, your cadence is, and imagine, like, most of the time, race walkers are going at a faster rate and considerably and holding that while maintaining technique over a long distance. It's pretty impressive, and I think sometimes people don't realize the amount of work it takes to do that. And of course, it leads to the next question: is how are you doing all this while working full time, which I hear you're doing now? How are you
Mm.
balancing those things?
Um, so it definitely takes a time of adjustment. Um, I can see it being a kind of going through the various kind of age groups, as I've kind of developed in athletics, and maybe seeing other athletes like step away from the event. And I don't know, always when I was younger, I'd always think like, oh, why, if you know, ever kind of done something to this level and was this passionate about something, would you ever kind of want to like step away from it or stop? But then having now kind of seen, I think for athletes, there is a lot of support kind of for juniors, then kind of through like university. But then I do find that then like once the kind of athlete's gone through the kind of like high school to university and college, that then after that, like unless if they're like pro, then or have, you know, funding, then you know the once they then start working full time, things get a lot harder. And I know for as well, like with like race walking or like any kind of like endurance event, the time that you have to put into it and trying to do like the kilometers that you need to fit in then around like a full time job is yeah, it's definitely like full on and very kind of intense, and you are non-stop. And like you mentioned at the start of the podcast, where you said that, you know, we've been trying to arrange this for a few weeks, that a lot of the issues just like trying to find kind of spare like hour around my day where I can like fit something like this in. That, you know, I kind of today I've been fortunate that I've done finished done an earlier shift to finish at 3 p.m. That then I went out and done like 16K in the afternoon. That then I've had then time to come back, have my dinner, and can fit this in at 8 o'clock for me. Whereas earlier on in the week when I was doing like 10 till 6 shift, I'd go out and do kind of 10, 12K in the morning, and then come then like 6 o'clock, travel like almost an hour then to the track to then go and then do a track session. So definitely takes a lot of organization. You definitely need help with it as well. I'm quite fortunate that my partner, she then like kind of can take a lot of that like load for me, that she'll kind of help with, like she'll like, you know, do the cooking then whilst I'm out training, and kind of like help with them like jobs around the house, that then kind of gives me then more time to do the training that I need to. But then as well, it's then being like organized as well with your recovery, that then if you are kind of coming in late from training, you got to like have a quick turnaround before you need to be in bed, getting up early again. But having kind of done this like routine now, where before I was doing a job where I was doing like night shifts, like longer shifts. So I'd kind of have like 4 days in, and then
Oh,
kind of like 5 or 6 days like off. So that kind of routine with training, like it was good that it afforded me like the time of the days off. But then with then like my sleep pattern,
you're a
it was
mess.
really like, yeah, ruining like that. That then and making that decision, then when I moved to Leeds to then find a new job, I was like, right, I'm gonna look for something that's just gonna be like a kind of like your standard, like Monday to Friday, like a 9 till 5 type thing, like around that. That then I've got like a consistent pattern, that then I can then, you know, really then kind of prioritize
Yeah, I
that
think that makes sense.
and that's as well something that I found that I've been able to do a lot more better than when I was younger, is like prioritizing that recovery. Um, but I think like the main thing with it is being organized, like I said, and then also like remember why you're doing it. So like keep focusing like on your goals and your ambitions, but then also enjoying it, because I think at like the end of the day, you know, that is like the number one thing. That's why kind of we all do it. That's why we, you know, started doing it in the first place. And it's why we kind of like continue on, even when it can be quite challenging.
No, completely. I don't think many people realize the sacrifice that elite athletes make. And on that note as well, I wanted to have this chat, but I wanted to as well not take too much of your time. We're kind of trying to keep things to a 25, 30-minute window as well, because some of the elite athletes I'm talking to, of course, time is valuable. And the work you put into chasing your dream while working full time, while transitioning from a 50 to a 20K are honorable and amazing. Thank you so much for chatting with us. And I'd love to have you on later and talk about how your journey's going. And anybody who's out there, please go check out Cameron Corbishley. He's on Instagram, and try and promote him on Instagram if I can remix or reshare some of his videos or photos to get him out there. But feel free to tune into the podcast. And Cameron, thank you for jumping on and talking with us.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
No, it's been an honor, and good luck with your training and good luck for chasing that dream.
Thanks a lot.
That's it, folks. The end of the podcast. No walkers have been harmed in the recording of this podcast. And of course, at the moment, we have no sponsors or supporters at this point to fund all this amazing podcasting. But if you're out there and have a race walk company that produces some sort of race walk apparel product or something you think race walkers would love, get hold of us. We'd love to have you on board. Give us a holler.